Welcome back, everyone, to the CrossFit Games podcast. I'm your host, Chase Ingraham, and along with me is Adrian, Conway, and Margaux Alvarez. Joining the show as we are going to recap day one of the 2021 Dubai CrossFit Challenge. Now, Margaux, me and Adrian picked our podium in our preview episode, so I feel like just to break the ice with you joining the show, we're going to put you on the spot right now before we talk about anything else. And Adrian and I would like you to pony up and give us your 1, 2, 3 podium for both the men and the women, as well as one dark horse pick for both sides. So carry on, young lady.
So I had a couple names and I mix match them around a little bit, but overall, I think Kristen Holte will take top spot, and then Laura. You guys
did
agree?
you listen to the show? Did you?
I did not actually.
We both pick that.
Yeah, so I think Kristen will take the top spot. I love her as an athlete, but also she has a lot of strengths that will be played out in the workouts that they have in the events. I believe that Laura will take second. Again, very strong individual. Depending on one of the workouts and how the gymnastics will play out, I could see her taking second. And then the third, Gabriella Magala. She did great at Rogue. I think she's someone that could definitely be consistent and place really well. She has competed in the past at Dubai and has placed really well at the top. So I think that she would take that third spot. For the wild card, I would believe Rebecca Vidison, if I said that correctly.
Ooh.
I think she could be a contender. She seems that she has some strengths that would play out in some of the events for the women this year.
I like it.
So.
I like it. Adrian, as a refresher for everybody, what was your top 3 and dark horse for the women's side?
So my top 3, I did put in a substitution. I'll be honest.
Oh no!
Because the reason is initially my top 3 I had Haley Adams.
That's right. Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So,
that's fair.
You got to remember when we were chopping it up, we had yet to know exactly the lineup, and we didn't know any of the events yet. So, with that being said, my top 3 went and are currently sit at Kristen Holte, Laura Horvath, number 2, replaced Haley Adams at number 2. Okay. And my third, I didn't change, was Emma Carey as a surprise.
Right, I forgot that you had her in your top 3. And then your wild card was?
Andrea Niesler.
Okay, my top 3 also having Kristen Holte at the top of the podium. Which, sorry, Kristen, that means you're not going to make it. Like we can't unanimously pick you, and that be the case. But usually we don't talk about her at all, and then she wins. So we'll see how this karma goes for her. Second place, I had Gabrielle Magala, which was Margaux's third, and in my third place, I have Laura Horvath as my top 3, and then I also had Andrea Niesler as my dark horse. So those are our women's picks before we get things started off. Margaux, who are your men's podium picks?
So for the men, I think Ricky Garard will actually take that top spot. Yeah.
All right.
So I think he would take the number 1, and then for second would be Roman. I think he's been, again, showing strong as an individual, and I think that he'll be right kind of behind Ricky and pushing him that threshold. So 1, 2 for them. And then Jeff Adler for that third place. So again, he did great in that first event. And I think that he can solidify that third spot. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the events play out. But those are my 1, 2, and 3 for the men. And then in terms of that wild card, I think Luka, one of the brothers, will be taking that wild card.
Luka Jukic. I like it. One of the Jukic brothers. All right. Adrian, what was your top 3 men in wild card?
All right. So I had to do another substitution here in my top 3. I was banking on Travis Mayer representing for the dads at the number 3 spot.
Yeah.
So my top 3 in order from 1 to 3 is Ricky G. So I got Ricky Garard as well at the top.
Okay.
I've got Roman Kronikoff in at second. And then I've got Jeffrey Adler at third. So Margaux's podium and I are very parallel.
Very close.
My dark horse was Tola Molequino.
Yeah.
So hopefully Tola keeps charging throughout the weekend and keeps charging up that leaderboard.
I would say day 2, which would be coming up in a matter of 12 hours. I got to get the times scheduled. It's 4 p.m. Friday in Dubai, and they're about 12 hours exactly ahead Pacific time. So do the math there for your time zones there. They start at 4 p.m. for day 2. Day 1 is in the books. My podium, I think we just have a mixed match of the same names. That I have Roman as 1. I have Adler as 2, and then Garard as 3. And my dark horse was also Tola Molequino. So we got a lot of names in there. We just got to decide who's. Did we all have a different order but the same top 3?
I think some similarities there.
Yeah,
That's some
me
changing of
Or
positions.
did you and Margaux had the exact same?
yeah, Margaux and I had the
Yeah.
same 1, 2,
All right,
3.
all right. Okay, so we got different picks, so that's so we can follow that throughout the weekend. So as you guys follow, we will do a daily recap after each day of competition from the Dubai CrossFit Challenge because this is the CrossFit Games podcast, and we are talking about our off-season events, one of the biggest ones in the off-season, and that is the 2021 Dubai CrossFit Championship. And I tell you what, I got to watch it on Instagram Live. I think we're all texting back and forth a little bit. We did the best we can with what they were giving us. And, no pun intended, but, we got some dads on the show, and it was a cool start to the weekend as we're hitting the ski slopes in the Arabian desert. When I know they previewed it, they talked about it. There was all this buzz of what it was going to be. Margaux, I'll start with you. What was it like seeing it unfold there on Instagram Live, now it's getting to see the athletes take on an event like that?
It was a unique, I think, experience. I think looking at previous Dubai championships, they had some sort of odd element, like you had the sand dunes, and I think for them to change it up a little bit, and they went to Ski Dubai, it obviously threw in a completely different element. I think a good handful of competitors are comfortable in the ski, in terms of the elements in the snow, but being able to see them handle something completely different and maybe unknown where they didn't really get to test it or try it out, I think that was something unique to watch and see it. And seeing that first event, I know we'll get into a little bit more of the events later, but seeing that first event, it reminded me of an event that I used to do while training. It was 5 rounds of a 500-meter ski, or 500-meter bike, or excuse me, 500-meter row, and then a 400-meter run for 5 rounds. So it kind of mimicked that. So I was kind of replaying how that went in my training days, and then looking to see how the athletes were attacking it and how they were, some of them were going a little hot out in the beginning. So I was interested to see how that was going to play out with the combination of the ski and the run.
Now, Adrian, you had some guesses on maybe what event 1B was going to be, because we knew it was going to be a run at the slopes. We didn't know what type of implement they may add to that. You were pretty close on your guess as far as what they're going to do for event 1B.
Yeah, it was pretty darn close. I guess that there'd be some kind of external load. Didn't know whether it'd be a med ball, sandbag, or a vest, but yeah, they took off up that slope and up around to the top and back down with the weight vest on. So I was pretty pleased to see that test. I think it is a test of a lot of things, especially being that it's early in the competition, but it's a test of really knowing yourself, because it's very difficult when you line up on something that has any kind of incline or decline and just look side to side and just say, oh, I'm going to beat so-and-so, or I'm going to keep up with so-and-so, because really it's very hard to know what other people are capable of. It's very different than just a flat surface at a track. So to throw in the snow, to throw in the cold climate, and then of course to add that weight vest was like icing on the cake. And I think we saw that, right? Even as we're spectating and we start to notice, like, some people came out hot and they were able to sustain the lead throughout the whole run. And then some people came out hot and we saw them bringing in the rear of a couple of those heats. So it was really cool. I really love the aspect of the temperature change. I think it's one thing to have a hill. It's one thing to have some load, but like to think about competing in the cold, it's like, I've never really had that opportunity, at least at a higher level in the sport of fitness, right? I've done it locally here in Salt Lake, but to think about my hands being cold and how I would adapt to that on a big stage, that's pretty new. So I think that's a really cool way. Maybe next year they'll throw out some barbells and really mess up their grip and do some other stuff. So I'd love to see that.
Well, and that was one thing I was curious of both your takes on this, because, as an athlete, especially with y'all's vast experience of games competition, both individually and team, is you see certain events and it's always hard to be like, man, I don't want to try that, or that doesn't look fun, or that does look fun. For you guys, Margaux, start with you. What was it? Did you have any of those feelings watching that? As like, man, this does look like something really cool that I would love to be able to replicate or do.
Definitely. I thought about it. I mean, I put myself in the athlete's shoes competing, and the emotions and the adrenaline that you have, that getting up there, getting ready to start the event, and then, the plan, how I'm going to execute this. What is my strategy going to be? Do I want to go all out on that skier to try to get ahead, anticipating that if I haven't tried this event out, how am I going to feel in that run? And so I had a little itching, like, ooh, I kind of want to try this out. And I kind of played my mind like, all right, what would be my, and I know we'll talk a little about like time caps and all that a little bit later, but I was kind of curious. My mindset is like, all right, well, if I'm going to do this, if I'm a 205 split on the ski, and then I'm running about a minute or a minute 20 on this, that's going to give me about a 230-ish split. And if I'm doing that for 5 rounds, that's going to put me at 1730. And I was like, man, I'm kind of out of shape. Like maybe my fitness is like kind of falling off that ski slope, like
Yeah.
I'm not able to finish under that time cap. I was a little hesitant, but again, I go through those emotions and thought process, and I look at it as not only as a competitor, but also how am I strategically going to plan this workout for myself? Or if I had an athlete that I'm going to coach, what strategy are they going to take, or what I suggest to them so that they can approach it where, can you have consistent splits for each round, but also try to do negative splits, especially if your goal was that time cap.
Adrian, of the two, which one do you think you would enjoy doing more?
I would have enjoyed part one more.
Yeah.
The extra modality, right? Being able to come down and be at the ski erg, knowing for someone like myself with longer arms and a bit more mass than a lot of the other competitors there, I enjoy when we get to play with an erg to any degree. So to know that I could pace that run accordingly, and then get back to the erg and be able to really manage fatigue there, and then use that run as an opportunity to kind of make up some ground, I think would have served me relatively well, being that I feel like any success that I've had in the sport of fitness is due to really me knowing myself and being able to run my own race, versus I think any given time I've ever lined up, the vast majority of the field was fitter than me. But I've been able to find ways to navigate workouts that optimize it for me, and I think that part A would have fared me a little bit better due to that.
Well, let's talk about someone who ran their own race, literally looked like they were by themselves, and that is Ricky Garard. Ricky Garard goes out there and wins event 1 and then turns around and just blasts event 2, where he was all by himself in that second event. The second event being, they say 700 meters. We'll just say a predetermined distance that nobody knew as fast as they could go. And in that span of average about 3 minutes to 3:15 for the men, Ricky beats everybody by nearly 20 seconds, which in running terms of watching it happen was much more eye popping than just seeing that number on paper, because that's nearly 100-meter edge he had on the entire field. And there was a lot of questions about Ricky coming in. How's he going to handle the pressure? How's he going to do with coming back to competition after 4 years and all that pent up stuff that he's been dealing with over the last 4 years? And honestly, I don't think he could have got two better events for Ricky's skill set to start the weekend off than he did in events 1A and 1B. Margaux, what was it like watching Ricky's event 1A, say after about maybe like the second or third round?
I mean, just seeing his kind of mindset and even just look on the look on his face, he was so determined. And it's like whatever other thought process or things that might have come up with those other competitors, or how he was it going to attack the workout? He looked just so determined, and you could see it in his face. And even afterwards, when he was done, he was like, he missed this. You could tell that he's been yearning for this for such a long time, obviously number of years, but seeing that everything else to the wayside just kind of melted away. No pun intended with the snow. But I think, again, you look at how his approach was, and it for me, I think back to how I focus on myself. It's myself and my strategy, my plan. I think that's how he was approaching it. Again, I can't speak for him, but that was my interpretation of it while watching him compete that workout.
Adrian, something I noticed at the end of round 4, and I'm wondering if you picked up on it too, but Ricky was finishing round 4, and before he got to the ski erg, he basically put his hands out in like a total gladiator move of like, is there no one else after round 4 to the athletes in the field? I mean, that gassed me up a little bit watching that. I mean, how was it for you?
Yeah, no, it fires me up tremendously. And it's funny because, of course, you alluded to we've got a text message thread. We're kind of going back and forth about things that we see and what we can discuss. And I responded to our group text, rugby and rage.
Yeah.
Ricky has this presence about him, and presence and attitude when you're in person and competing against other individuals goes an extremely long way, right? And I've had an opportunity to compete amongst Matt Frazier, Rich Froning, right? And like there's people that have this polarizing ability that when they enter a room, you actually feel them to some degree, whether it's because they're huge, whether it's because they're muscular, whether it's because but like, I'll be honest, Ricky has that thing. Like there's like this thing about him, right? This And so when you see him do things like that, I don't know that he can even help it, right? Like we've seen him make some mistakes and maybe use some words or say some things on Instagram and social media when doing some workouts, right? Like we've seen
We
that.
don't say that word here. We don't say that word in the States.
Right. And
The old "see you next Tuesday" is what Tommy Marquez aptly described.
but that amount of like swagger, I think, or even honestly, you could refer to as aggression, comes from his history in playing rugby and doing it at a very high level. And of course, I think we got to see that front stage and center with these two events specifically, right? That's like wheelhouse stuff for him out there on that slope where there's suffering involved. He could let someone run a little bit of a faster race than him in the first couple rounds and then just kind of reel them in because he knows his capacity in those elements so well. So it did fire me up. It excited me. And I think it certainly catered to his athletic background and strong capabilities. So we still got a lot of points on the board and there's still a lot to see, but he started fast.
It's a good start. And speaking of just getting back into competition and looking like she hasn't aged a day on the women's side on top of the leaderboard, Sam freaking Briggs, the engine from England, goes, "Hold on, young bucks. I still got it," which is crazy to think. I mean, Sam is north of 40. She's competing against women half of her age who are also good at events like this. The Michaela Norman, who's beat her on the sand dunes in Dubai in previous years. And Sam comes out when we kind of left her for dead a little bit after the Rogue Invitational. I was one of them. I put my hands up as like, hey, Legends with Margaux Alvarez sounds like a really good place to be maybe next year. And she's like, no, I think I'll just sit in first place after the first day of the competition. Margaux, what was it like seeing Sam go out there, just like we said in this title, vintage Sam Briggs?
I mean, it just obviously brings a huge smile to my face, but being able to compete with Sam over the years, multiple years in a row, is just her fight and her dedication and her commitment to continue to be involved and give her best foot forward in anything that she does. It's obviously it's been an honor to compete with her and it brings back lots of memories when we share the competition floor. But I know that she's not done yet. She wants to continue to, give everything she has. And obviously, I mean, these were two events that were definitely going to be up her alleyway, and I'm really excited that she did win that event. And I think it was very strategic to see how she would come down that hill or come down that snow hill, and she was a little more not necessarily loose, but she allowed her body to move a little bit more. So I think that carried her a little bit faster down the hill, and I think it gave her a little bit of advantage to increase that distance between her and second. And her using that every single round, I think it increased the amount of meters that she had in between the person that was behind her and herself. And again, I would love to see how the rest of the competition goes. I know some of the like events may not be upper alleyway like the clean and jerk, but I know that she has that fire inside of her that she will make sure that she throws and literally leaves everything on that competition floor.
Adrian, when we look back at the Dubai CrossFit Challenge over the years, it's actually been a Sam Briggs show for the most part. She's either won it or podiumed, and we're still seeing it after all of these years, being 2 years nearly removed from the last time we competed here. I mean, we talked together at Rogue. It's like, okay, just like any athlete, it's like we find the edge of the cliff as far as where it is, and then she comes out and does this. What was it like seeing that for you?
Man, it was Sam being who we know Sam is, right? Like for us that have been around the community for a while, we understand and recognize her greatness, specifically when it comes to anything that is going to exhibit aerobic capacity. And I think what is staggering to me is that like we know from like a scientific understanding that at 35, 36, like our aerobic capacity is something that diminishes no matter how much we train it. In fact, we just kind of continue to dissipate, right? But then we see Sam Briggs, who is like you mentioned, Chase, like the upper echelon. She's now out of the 35 to 39 competitions group, and yet she finds herself still set apart when it comes to the engine because that is what her name is, compared to all these youngsters that technically have this advantage. Now she put in the years, she put in the time, she was all the way up here when the rest of us were all the way down here anyways.
Yeah.
But to see her do this and get to excel like this, I think it's a great example, one, to really what CrossFit is specifically, right? Like when we talk about work capacity across broad time and modal domains, if you aim to like create such a fitness that it is superior, even as we age, look at what you can still do, right? And people like us find ourselves counting out Sam Briggs, and in what she do, she kicks us in the chest and
Yeah.
she proves us wrong. And I think that's really cool. So it fired me up to see that. I mean, I think we all would agree, like she's super easy to root for. So as we're sitting here, like I hope she continues to put on a show.
Me too. And, day 2 is going to shake out to be a challenging day for everybody. I think everyone's going to have their thing or not their thing going into day 2. And we'll touch on that before the end of the show. One thing I did want to talk about is just the competition itself, right? Dubai is heralded as, the biggest prize, the most unique events, the most unique destinations to do this, right? We're talking about a ski slope event. We've been to the desert. We've been to the beach. They have their own tennis stadium, but there was a few shaky things yesterday in day 1. Now, granted, it's been almost 2 years since they've done this, and I feel like we saw a little bit of rust yesterday across a few things, and I'd like to give y'all's opinion on it, but one is just communication to the public, right? What's going on, when it's going on, where it's going to be. What was disheartening to see so many people is like, we knew it was going to be on Instagram Live and when, but it felt like everybody that turned in had no idea. And that's either a product of people not actually doing their due diligence and just showing up to be a social media person. And I think the other thing is that Dubai needs to do a better job of communicating what's happening to the public and when. If we're getting our best information from other websites and not Dubai's, I think that's a little bit of a problem. And we saw a few other hiccups. I'd like your opinion on this. You did an invite only competition, yet you did a lottery draw for what the heats were going to look like. And what we saw is some of the best athletes scattered across 2 separate heats, which had a dramatic impact on how people finished. Adrian, I'll start with you. Is like, should Dubai have just picked their own heats based off who they thought the best athletes were in the top 10 and the bottom 10?
The direct answer I say is no, and I don't know that there's a correct way to do this. In my opinion, and now this continues to need more insight and more forethought behind it, but shoot out a basic workout for everyone that is already predestined to come or already pre-selected to come, and let that be, hey guys, this is our seating workout. It's well-rounded, traditional CrossFit, 12 to 15 minute window, could be AMRAP style, just like something we'd see in the open. Have at it. This is what is going to seed you. But aside from that, without the qualification process there to establish it, to me, this was almost, we're kind of mitigating as much troubleshooting as possible when I think we look at this random selection. But to me, it's fine. As an athlete, I'm like showing up ready to do the work no matter what heat I'm in. So it's irrelevant.
Margaux, for you competing is say, I think one of the unfortunate positions Michaela Norman was in is she was in heat 1 and the next top 4 were in heat 2 on the event 1 in particular, where they all had a time to beat. Right. And she still got second, even though she was all by herself. As an athlete, does that something that bothers you, or you just are there to show up and do the work and you get the work done the best you can?
Yeah. So 2 things. I think I definitely focus, like I said before, in competition, it's, I'm focusing on my lane, my plan, my strategy, and it's myself against myself. Yes, there's other competitors around you. That's it, really important to make sure you're not getting pulled other directions. You start doubting yourself. At the same time, the second component is, if you're in a second heat, you might be thinking, oh, I'm doing really good compared to the people next to me. You're aware of them around you, the pace where they are in terms of position wise, but that could also put you at a disadvantage if you were going in the second heat and, you'd be right in the middle, or you'd be at the end of the first heat. Granted, yes, she did still finish in a top spot, but it can play effect. And we've talked about this. My coach and I have talked about this over the years in terms of competition. It's like, you want to be in that first heat or that final heat, because if you're having everyone around similar times, similar skill levels, then that can play effective how fast you're pushing it. Do you decide to pick it up in that 4th round to get yourself a little bit faster? If you're looking at this workout, especially that first workout, we have 5 rounds. If your times are slipping or your splits are slipping and you don't have anyone else to compare it to, you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm 5 seconds slower, I'll be fine. But if you're in a different heat and you know that start to be, you get off the skier second to last, then that definitely changes a few things. So it's, I think, being aware and being cognizant of it, but knowing that you can't just like rest on your laurels if you're ahead and you're like, all right, well, there's still 1 or 2 more heats after this.
Adrian, seating aside, along the lines of what Margaux was talking about, is that it's an advantage being in the final heat. It's a clear advantage being in the final heat. And as a competitor, Margaux says, like, you run your race, but it's nice to know this event is going to take 11 minutes. So what do I have to do to get that? Is that something you hope for and strive for going into competition, of being in that final heat so you can take advantage of that knowledge?
Absolutely. I mean, and a lot like what Margaux said, it's through the years for me, I think about from a regional perspective, right? Like if I was going to prepare for regional, I was going to do my due diligence in the open to align myself up with that very last heat from event 1 at the regional setting.
Yeah, because they take it out of the open, right?
Yeah, it was a big deal because there's these established times, and we see this all the time. And the everyday athlete can think about it in regards to the open or regards to the workout of the day. Hey, listen, if you go in at 5:30 in the morning and you're the first athlete to take the hit of the workout, there's a reason you're texting your buddy like, hey, what'd you get, man? And you have that advantage as the final class in the evening to see, ooh, so-and-so got this, and ooh, so-and-so got that. And then you have that ability to not just in the workout run your own race, but then it's like, okay, I could really put it down here and potentially have the best time of the day. And I think about, in the essence too, there's levels to how you attack this, because there's also this natural consideration for self-preservation, right? So as an athlete, do you know you need to go fast and get points? No doubt. But also, there's about 7 more workouts left, or there's about 8 more workouts left throughout the course of the 2 days. And it's like, man, if I'm in heat 1 and I treat it like an all-out sprint just to make sure I'm good to go, well, what if you actually end up winning the whole workout by 1.5 minutes against everyone, but your legs are dusted? So yeah, there's so much unknown and disadvantage to that first heat, but you got to do what you got to do.
True. A couple of the things that were a little shaky is, I said the seating was one, aggressive time cap for event 1. I thought that was something they could have easily adjusted on the fly. I mean, you got the tiebreakers that nobody really knew, and that goes along with the communication. Is like, I think it would have been really nice if in the middle of that event they just went, hey, just tack another 3 minutes on. It's a 20-minute time cap versus the 17, because only 3 women finished underneath the time cap, and
two,
and then a handful of men.
5. Sorry.
Right?
Yeah. For the men, for women, it was 2. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. And it's like you have full control of your event. There's no schedule. It's 6:45 in the morning, and I feel like it's incumbent on the event and those running it to make that decision. We've had that happen at the games before. Shoot, that happened last year at the games during the clean ladder with the run.
Yep.
Where Dave extended the time cap and changed the run for the next event because he saw what happened in the previous one. And I was just, my question is, like, who tested this event that did this in under 17 minutes? Like, who tested this event that was better than Garard and Sam Briggs?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were actually talking about that. And in my mindset, like I said earlier, like if my split's 3:30 and I'm doing this for 5 rounds at 17:30, that put me over the time cap. Again, whether my fitness is, leaving me and I need to get a little better, or everyone else is improving a lot faster. But then seeing that only 2 people finish it, I was like, all right, I felt a little bit better about myself. But again, the question is, who tested it? And I'm just curious, like, what was their idea or time frame? Like, whoever tested it was in the exact same position. Was it exactly at the Ski Dubai, or was it somewhere else where it implemented or was similar to that? And again, if I'm an athlete, I obviously have that drive and desire to finish underneath the time cap. That's always my goal, underneath that time cap. You want to be capped. But if you only have 2 of the athletes that are competing, again, on the women's side, then it's like, all right, it makes you question a little bit. Could they've added minutes? Yeah, definitely. Because then you would have seen more people finish. Then it goes to the next point, like, all right, well, what's the tiebreaker? If I'm running up the hill and I'm 2 steps behind, are we marked the same? Am I marked at the top? Do I get, half a point closer because I'm at the top of the turnaround time? I know a couple athletes were very close to the end to coming in. So like, all right, well, you didn't touch a skier, but you're, 5 steps away.
Right.
What do you get behind the person that's maybe 5 steps behind you then? Again, just looking at areas of improvement. And there's, again, communication is huge and important. And I think even if you have enough, or you think you have enough communication, there definitely could still be more communication to just clarify things. And of course, not everything's going to be perfect, but especially when it comes to competition and everyone's out there for those points, it's going to come down to making sure that, you weren't screwed in the process to get the point or to get that tiebreaker.
Yeah, and then the last thing I want to touch on, just one that was big, and a couple athletes actually talked about this on the women's side, was on the event 1B. We said the distance that they announced was somewhere around 700 meters on the ski run. Is basically you run up the side of the ski slope, and then you turn around and you come back down. And apparently, in heat 1 of the women, the leader took an early turn. And what was supposed to be a 700-meter effort turned out to be more towards like a 400-meter. And what they did was they just accepted that as the new run course. Well, a couple girls in heat 1 went out running like it was supposed to be the distance at which they were told it was going to be. So they paced it as such. And then when girls took the early turn, they were already behind and couldn't make up the distance. And even more compounded was that the next heat did the same run, now with the knowledge that the run is going to be shorter. And those are just things that you can't have happen in a competition. And that sucked to see, because you don't want that to be the narrative of the weekend. It is only the first day. They still have 2 more days and a lot more events to come. But it's just a bummer to see, and it's something that just needs to be discussed going in. Adrian, is like, what your opinion is. My opinion is like, I would have just stuck to my guns, like, you took the wrong course, but everybody did. So it's just, that's a tough thing to do. Like, how do you think you should have handled that?
To be honest with you, hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
But I feel as though, look, I mean, they're competing out there for 50 bands, okay? 50 bands, 50,000 smackaroos.
Yeah.
Guys, you got to dot your I's and cross your T's. And, we've all had the experience to work with CrossFit HQ. And that is one thing they do to a very high level is there's processes in place. There's, you got to wait for the word. And while you might get, impatient about waiting for clarification on something, but the details are going to be there. And we know that the devil's in the details. In this example, if they really had these things taken care of, we wouldn't have to talk about it. Right. And it's disappointing. But everybody's got something to learn. And I think that even that early example of the adjustment with the time cap potential, like that's an act of humility. So we messed up. So let's get ahead of this and change it and make it right. And when you see someone like Dave Castro, who's willing to do that on the spot, like, hey, I made a mistake. We got to switch this. And we'll all watch that, right? Whether it's on the behind the scenes or whether it's on the next documentary or something, but he's willing to eat that so that these athletes actually have a better experience. The crowd has a better experience, and the playing feels more level, and it's true to the test that he intended. So it's disappointing. I hope that they learn from it for sure. And even immediately, right? So in the days to come, as we get ready to start chatting about day 2 and we think about those events, if they got to make changes, hopefully they can do it.
Yeah, if you're going to make a mistake like this or have a hiccup or something doesn't go according to plan, it's at least you had it day 2 on the slopes of an event that was, it's still 100 points though. And as you said, like it makes a big difference when you're looking at the end, because you lose 40 points because you didn't get to run the short one like you thought it was going to, or didn't think it was going to be. I mean, it makes an impact at the end of the weekend. So hopefully it doesn't come back to bite anybody, and hopefully, they learn from this. So let's look at the podium after one day, 2 events of competition. On the men's side, as we said earlier, you have Ricky Garard sitting with 200 points with 2 wins. Roman Karenikov behind him getting second and second. So your top 2, Ricky, Roman. And then Willie George sitting in 3rd place. He gets 4th in event 1, 3rd in event 2. And this is his first competition back from shoulder surgery that he had to pull out of the 2021 games season out of. On the women's side, you have at the top of the leaderboard, Sam Briggs with a first place finish in event number 1, 4th in event number 2. Kristen Holta just 5 points back with a 5th place finish on event 1, first place finish on event 2, and Laura Horvath getting 4th and 2nd in event 1 and 2. When you look at this leaderboard, what's always interesting after the first day, it's a lot like the first day of the CrossFit Games, is with the uniqueness of these two tests, there's a lot of variance coming down the line with a lot more events, a lot more classic CrossFit, if you want to punt to that phrase, which I just did, and I'll happily do so, is that it's really hard to just look at the leaderboard and be like, okay, well, this is what we're in store for. But when you see these names in this after 2 unique tests, it's kind of curious to see how it might shake out after the weekend. Margaux, what are your thoughts on the podium so far?
I think they're, again, similar, close to my picks. I knew Sam, looking at the events and seeing how they unfolded, she'd be at the top. I feel like there's a good handful of events that might change the order a little bit, but I believe that Laura and Kristen being there, they'll be consistent at the top. There could be some interchanging after the next 2 events, or 3 events to see, but I kind of seeing how it's playing out versus how my picks and how our picks have played out, especially on the men's side, they're right there. So I think it'll be consistent. There will be some ebb and flow changes. I think some of the people that are in, top 10, but maybe that 4th, 5th, 6th spot, they could move around a little bit, and they might be able to overtake that 3rd spot for the podium. Again, interesting to see the workouts that are planned for this upcoming next day, and how they'll favor those individuals that are in the top 3 spots, but then also those that are right underneath it, and if they can kind of push someone else out and take their spot.
Adrian, for you, knowing what we had in day 1 and what's to come in day 2, we're going to see a few different names occupying the top 3 after the second day of competition.
We will, right? I think that's if you've been around the sport and I think that we'll know that there's going to be some changing and some moving. Day 2 of the Dubai CrossFit Championship will certainly be a moving day, and it's just really because if you think about the layout of the programming, which both of you spoke to already, it's like, was event 1A different than event 1B? Sure. Was it much different? Right. And we noticed that like the events did strongly favor each other, and in the essence that they don't. What I look down the leaderboard is I'm like, okay, so if someone did well in part 1 and then really did poorly in part 2, that might say more about their overall conditioning than it does about their ability to just run with a vest, because they did already so much running on that hill,
Right.
and so much of their aerobic capacity was tested. So I do think there will be some shifting. I think when we look at the men's side, there might be less shifting than when we look at the women's side. So I certainly expect Ricky and Roman and Willie to be able to move some external load and do well on the chipper as well that's to come. I think, again, even as we look down the leaderboard to someone like Jeffrey Adler, who's keeping himself in contention through these first 2 events that we know historically isn't like one of his strong suits, that he finds himself in a great spot going into day 2 with a real opportunity to flourish there. And then on the women's side, I think that, unfortunately, the liftoff we know isn't going to be Sam's strong suit, but she still has that chipper to come with 40 bar muscle ups and some A jumps, which I can't wait to see exactly how those play out, and some parallel handstand push-ups and stuff. So I think that we will see a little bit of shifting and parity on day 2, but it might be less than even I assume.
I'd be curious. So before we get to what's coming up in day 2, I'd like to recap one thing from each of you that surprised you on the day, whether it's an event, something that happened behind the scenes, an athlete's performance. But I'll give you some second. I'll go myself. The big thing for me was I was curious to see what Jeffrey Adler would do. We saw him at Rogue Invitational do well in events he traditionally doesn't do well in those work capacity events, those burner events, those longer aerobic tests where he's usually the short event power strong guy. And in talking to him after the 2020 games in Aromas, it was like, hey, you are one of the best with the barbell. Just throw that sucker away for like 3 or 4 months and let's just not suck at the longer ones, right? Not win, not be even top 5, but like, let's just not be bottom 5 in this anymore. And he comes out and gets 7th in event 1 and 5th in event 2, or 1A and 1B. And for me, that was a really cool thing to see from Jeffrey Adler. So that will be mine. Margaux, what was the one thing that surprised you over the first day?
I think one thing I was kind of anticipating was how Ricky was going to perform. It's been a while since he's been in competition. And I know from personal experience, if you haven't done competing, then you go on to, the start of the season, you go into competitions, that adrenaline and those nerves, they can kind of be a lot. They can maybe overtake you. So I was interested to see how he was going to react to that. If it was going to be something where you've been at a competition and you get really excited and that takes over, you're not able to control that. So then you go out super hot and that first and second round, but then you taper because you can't keep that speed and that pace. So I was really surprised again to see him maintain that since it's been so many years he's been at a competition. Not saying that he wouldn't be able to hold his own, but again, that was something I was like, all right, well, like he did that and then came back for another back-to-back win for 1B or the second event. So that's kind of the thing that I was looking at. And again, that competition experience I think is huge, and I think it's really important to be attuned to that, not only for him, but anyone else. But that was something I was kind of keeping my eye on.
Yeah, that was I don't know for you guys, but that's the first time I've been watching in a while where I was kind of like getting on the edge of my seat after each round. And
Like
each
palms
round,
are a
I'm
little
like,
sweaty.
yeah, I was
Yep.
really getting into it. And it was like on this shaky Blair Witch Project Instagram live video, which was
That is a great description.
wonderful. Adrian, what about you? What was your biggest takeaway or surprise from day one?
My biggest surprise, I'm going to go down the women's leaderboard all the way to 11 and talk about Sarah Sigmundsdottir. I think that, listen, all things considered, to see her back on the competition floor is exciting in itself. But then to think like she's on this surface that is covered in snow that has a dramatic incline and decline, and our girl is coming off just months ago an ACL repair. So to me, that's really exciting, and I'm really happy for the way that she performed. I mean, I have no skin in the game with Sarah. I'm not a coach. I don't program for her or even know her personally, but it's like I think that's a really good sign for where she's at. In her recovery and ability to perform. And I think, if I'm out there on the female side of things, and I'm taking the back seat to someone that closely in the recovery process and coming off of ACL surgery, I'm like, okay, I got some things I got to work on like yesterday. So
Yeah.
I think that's awesome for Sarah. And that really excited me about day one.
I mean, you look at Sarah in event one, she gets seventh.
Yep.
Seventh. I mean, that is not an event she traditionally does well in any ways. And the names that beat her: Sam Briggs, Kristen Holta, Laurel Horvath, Michaela Norman, Gabriella Magala, and Emily Rolfe. And you're going to tell me the next person in line was going to be Sarah Sigmundsdottir versus all these other athletes? I would have said you're crazy. And that would have been her at full strength. So for her to do that coming off that ACL is also impressive. And, the thing that has her down in 11th is the 14th place finish at event two. Now, reminder, there's only 19 actually competing. But an event like that has such a steep incline, but a steeper decline. And as you guys know, is like if you've got any foot, ankle, or knee injury, it's the downhills that are worse than the uphills, let alone downhill on snow, ice with a weight vest. So I can only imagine part of her approach was, let's not hurt ourselves on the downhill. And there's probably some conservative play coming into that she may not have to do going forward. So I like those. So let's look at day number two. We have 3 events. Again, it'll start at 4 p.m. on a Friday in Dubai. That'll be about 4 a.m. Pacific time, if you guys are following along with us. And they have 3 events. And the first event is going to be a liftoff. It's just going to be a clean and jerk. Now, as it says right now, is it's only going to be 2 lifts per athlete with what looks like 15 set weights for them to choose from. So they can start at any weight, and I believe they can jump to any weight. They're just going to have 2 opportunities to do so, which is not a lot of wiggle room as far as where to start and how to jump. Adrian, for you is, how do you approach this, right? You have set weights, so you can't even pick your own middle weights. You just got to go out there, pick one lift, and then try to do a little bit better. What's the approach to this?
The approach to this is a tough one, man. And then honestly, I think about from a coaching or a leadership perspective as also a participating athlete. It's like you look at the available weights, and this specific liftoff is going to take a ton of self-awareness. While you're going to be able to have a lift where you might be able to take a bit of some chance and risk, it's really important that you establish something very confident out the gate. So I think what we'll do is probably see a lot of these athletes step out and choose to open somewhere in my assumption around an 85 to 90% of their 1 rep max.
Okay.
Choose to hopefully hit it with some confidence. And then for me, it's like, now it's really time to almost gamify this approach. And where does my full capacity reach its limits? But then also, where's the field going to sit? And then I've got to make a choice. Like, do I casually keep it safe and only go for X weight, or do I wait until that heavier weight's on the bar and go for a better placing? But boy, this is going to be some serious back and forth. Athletes are probably going to be in the back, taping their mouths shut, not saying anything about what they're about to do or about to attempt.
Well, another bonus is hopefully, if they go in order of, typically in this format, you would say last to first in order. So you get the benefit of watching what people do, which is a huge advantage in this format. Margaux, Adrian's talking about 85 to 90%. And he was like, oh, okay, that sounds doable. But like, think about that with their list. Your average clean and jerk for an athlete of this caliber is what, around 345 for the men, maybe 235, 245 for the women. It's like, okay, yeah, just go out there for the women, just throw 225 out there because it's 90% of what a 245. And that's not just something you can warm up to and sit in a warm up area for 10 to 15 minutes and go out there and hit with knowing you only have 2 tries to do so. What type of pressure is on you going out there knowing you have 2 shots?
I mean, you definitely don't want to mess it up. I joke about that, but I think back to 2017 when we had the snatch where you have your platform, you have 2 lifts, you want to hit a weight, like Adrian said, that's relatively comfortable. You can hit, so that secures you that lift. Because if you don't lift and you get 0 points, then that definitely puts you at a deficit. But you have to take into account, all right, how much time do you have to lift? Because you want to hit, if not get close to what you're going to lift in the warm-up area. But do you have 20 minutes to hang out, or is it going to take you 10 minutes? Are you hanging out for 30 minutes before you get lined up? And then again, if you do start from the bottom going up from last to first place, are you first place and then you have another 20 minutes to lift? How quickly are you lifting? So there's a lot of things to kind of consider and have in mind. And it's like the approach would be, all right, if I'm going to go out there, I want to make sure that when I'm in the warm-up area, I'm hitting close, or if not the weight that I want to hit, have a consistent lift that I know I'm going to hit, even if I rest for 20, 30 minutes. And then, again, depending on your approaches, if you're like, hey, I want to put it all out there, I'm going to go big and then have a second lift. And then if you know that's something you've hit before, that it's close to your PR or a little bit over, then that might give you the advantage. And it's sometimes a little bit of a mind game because you're looking at what other competitors are going to hit. You can't control that. You can't control if they're going to hit a lift because they're like, hey, yeah, guys are like, I'm going to go for 360. But what if they miss? What if they like get a little bit off balance and they miss? And that opens the door for you. But I don't want to say you don't want to rely on that or base your decision off of that because you have no control of that. So control what you can, focus on what you're able to, but it also be adjustable if need be.
I like that. So let's look at event 2. And I'm going to go out there and say the world's hardest chipper ever assembled. So let's walk through this. Athletes are going to take on a 50 cal row, 40 A jumps with a vest on, which we found out is just jumping to 2 ballistic blocks or elevated surface on the outside of each foot. 30 sandbag cleans at 150 and 100, 20 bar muscle ups, 10 parallel handstand push-ups, and then you go back up the list. 20 bar muscle ups, 30 sandbag cleans, 40 A jumps, 50 cal row. The time cap's 23 and 25, so I'm wondering which of the Avengers they had test out this event. But what screams off the page at me is 60 sandbag cleans at 150 and 100. And I'm looking at that 23-minute cap, and I'm like, can I just do 60 in that time frame by itself? Because I'm not sure I am capable of doing so. When you guys are looking at this chipper, I mean, you've done so many different ones over the years, whether it's in your gym, in the open regionals, and the CrossFit Games. How is this one stacking up as you guys are looking at it on paper?
I mean, I personally love sandbag cleans, so more of those.
Fantastic.
I like it. I am interested to see how those A jumps will go with the weight vest. I was a little kind of unsure, is the weight vest just those A jumps or is it for the entire workout? if
If
it's
it's
for
an
the
entire
entire
workout, nobody's finishing half of
if
this.
if it's an entire workout, it definitely changes those bar muscle ups, but also the parallel handstand push-ups, and also changes in terms of how that workout's going to go for individuals. For Laura Horvath, I know she struggles a little bit with gymnastics or high volume gymnastics. So if you're adding a vest for that, how is that going to determine that placing or that workout for her specifically? If I'm looking at this workout, I think Kristen Holte all over it. She's very proficient in gymnastics. That back to back to back, so bar muscle up, parallel handstand push up, bar muscle up, that's going to be a big chain or big kind of chunk of gymnastics right there. So again, it's how hot are you going on that first cal row? I mean, personally, you want to have a nice steady pace, but you don't want to go so hot that you're then trying to catch your breath. You're then trying to play catch up with the rest of the movements. And again, that time cap, thinking it might be a little aggressive compared to what we had before. But again, curious to how they determined that time cap, who tested them out. And again, I think it's proficiency in those sandbag cleans. Like, can you move that load and be relatively comfortable after you've done a good amount of gymnastics, but then get back on the rower to finish it strong?
Adrian, for you, you look at this list, you look at the volume, the weights, some of the redundancy in the movement patterns. Where's the hiccup going to be for a lot of these athletes?
It's certainly going to be the sandbag cleans. And I say that just because of if we step back and we think about how long is it going to take each given particular set of movements. The A jump is a foreign one, and yes, it's with a vest, but it's a jump, so it's going to spike our heart rate. I'm going to come out on that row literally as if it's a warm up row, and then no matter what, those 30 sandbag cleans just eat up a good bit of fatigue. Where any one of these 20 athletes on either side with 20 bar muscle ups, 40 bar muscle ups in a workout,
Right.
a lot of them are cycling those at a rate, even if they break them up 2 to 3 times on each side of the workout, it's going to be very comparable, meaning that an athlete strong in gymnastics may choose to go 20 bar muscle ups unbroken. Someone like myself may choose to break it up on 2 or 3 different occasions. That person that goes 20 unbroken is still only going to beat me off of that implement by 15 seconds because I'm only dropping for a couple breaths. And then I think about the same with the 10 parallel handstand push-ups. Unless they're strict and there's a twist that we don't really know about them, I'd almost suggest they take them out of the workout because of how long the time will be spent there versus these other movements. And then again, to me, and if I'm coaching someone, if I'm going through this workout in my mind, the workout starts about 10 bar muscle ups into the back half of the workout, depending on where this time cap plays out. Again, those latter 30 sandbag cleans coming off of those bar muscle ups to me is really the sticking point. And I think at that place, there will be some opportunity for people. But also, I think that's really where a lot of the suffering specifically is going to need to take place for people that find themselves in a lead and need to really continue to gas pedal in order to hold on to that lead. So the sandbag cleans, like you mentioned, Chase, to me are that sticking point.
When you look at it, you said it's not necessarily like time lost element in here.
Yeah.
A big time loss. You look at the 100 cals of rowing that you're going to have to be doing. And that's going to be what? If you're a good rower, 5 minutes. And if you're not supposed to be rowing that hard, you're looking at 6 towards 7 of 100 total cals of rowing. And then you got the 60 sandbag cleans. And even if you're doing I feel like one every 6 seconds is still a fast pace for 60. You got another 6 minutes there. So 12 minutes of your workout is already taken between 2 of the different movements. So you got another 11 minutes to get all the other stuff done. I'm curious how this is going to go. Like I said, what's always fun is watching these athletes take on events that I think are just gargantuan and be like, nah, I'm good. I'm like, oh,
Yep.
wow.
I got it.
I've really lost touch with how
I
fit
think
some of these people are.
I think one thing to also consider too is a lot of posterior chain, right? So you're rowing the extension on the sandbag clean. So how strong is your posterior chain, your back? Do you do all that in your training? Also from yesterday, it was a lot of closing of that hip, but you're also extending your backs in around a position that put a little bit of strain in your back, not hurt, nothing like that. But again, those constant reps, how many pulls did you do on the ski erg, and how's it going to affect you here when you go to pull on the row? Then you're pulling from the floor. And of course, it's a pull on the bar muscle up, but it's going to be a little bit different. And I think someone that's really proficient in gymnastics, they might move quickly through, the 20 bar muscle ups, the handstand push-ups. They may break them up. They may not, again, depending on the individual. I think of Sam Briggs. She might be able to do them in 2 sets, maybe 1 set if she wants. How she move. I know has great capacity, so the row may not be the issue. It may be, the A jumps. Again, not sure how that's going to really work out, but it's also, I think, what did you do in your training? And that posterior chain is going to be huge, not only for this, but also coming up into other events.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the third event for the day, we don't know the exact details of how they're going to navigate through this from heat to heat, but they have 5 rounds. Each round will be for time, and they're going to do a little bit of an elimination. So 20 athletes, men and women. After round 1, they're going to cut to 16, 12, 8, and then the final round will have 4. Each round will be a 20 cal bike erg, 15-meter unbroken handstand walk, and then 10 overhead squats, 85 and 60 kilos. That's about 185 and 135. So a decent weight, but a weight not unfamiliar to these athletes at that volume. But after blowing your legs out on a bike erg, after taxing your overhead on a handstand walk, it all having to be fast and unbroken, and then going into the overhead squats, as far as it's set up, this might be my favorite workout of the day of the 3 that they have, because now there's that forced intensity like we saw in any type of round robin elimination style, is that you're going to just gonna have to get out. Like, there's no strategy. Like, you could strategize yourself out of the first round real quick. So when you guys see this one, Adrian, I'll start with you first. Is it, I feel like this is the one you've been looking forward to for day number 2.
Yeah, I'm extremely excited about this, and if you want to win, get off the bike. You got to get off the bike.
Yeah.
And while that's where a lot of the reservation wants to come from some athletes, and there's going to be hesitation there and a bit of fear, which even would sit in on someone who finds themselves in a position where erg work is a strong suit. You've got to be willing to get off the bike and kick into that handstand walk. And then, for particular individuals, there will be no hesitation for the overhead squats. And for some, there might be a little bit when they get to that barbell, but whoever gets that thing moving fast, as long as they keep it in place, will likely walk away with the W in each one of these heats. And, it's very hard because, again, I mentioned preservation earlier, where you're like, okay, experienced athletes, champs, they think ahead. But in this workout, because of the forced intensity, like you mentioned, man, you can't do it. You got to go, and it's pedal to the metal from heat 1.
I like it. Margaux, your approach to this, if you just from an athlete perspective, is what piece of those 3 are you looking at the most?
So this reminds me of a workout that I used to do when my coach would program for me a lot. It would be 10 overhead squats into a handstand walk, rest, repeat for 3, 4 rounds. And then we would change it up, handstand walk into overhead squat. So I'm having flashbacks of my training and seeing this workout. And I mean, looking at it, I would feel comfortable going from that handstand walk into the overhead squat, because in a way you are a little fatigued, but at the same time you're warmed up, you're pressing into the floor, you're walking. And it comes down to the proficiency of your handstand walk, and you're also endurance of your shoulders. How comfortable do you do that in training? Do you feel comfortable going from your handstand walk into those overhead squats? And you're right, is that pushing for intensity. It's 1 round, 4 times, 5 times. So can you push that intensity each round? So you're obviously everything's unbroken, but the efficiency of your movement from the handstand walk to overhead squats, to make sure you're not resting too much at the top or resting at the bottom or going negative in the bottom of that squat. So I look at it, I'm like, maybe I should try this and see how it goes. But I think, again, obviously a couple different elements going into play, but I'm excited for it. It looks fun.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. All right. So before we close out, I'm going to throw something at both of you without any heads up. Heads up, by the way. Based off the events that you guys know will be in event 2 and where people stack on the leaderboard, who do you think is going to have the biggest moving day on day number 2? Either men, women on the leaderboard. So right now, and it could be down and it could be up. depending on who you guys see out there. But based off what these events are, who do you think's going to have themselves a day on day number 2? Adrian, we'll put you on the spot first.
Yeah, put me on the spot, man, and I'm gonna lean into my podium selection, and my vision for the future of this darn sport. I'll say is Emma Carey. I think
All
is gonna have
right.
a good day too. I believe that a lot of these events are things that she will find herself having some really good success in. So I think she'll make a pretty significant jump in day 2.
Emma Carey currently sitting 13th overall, just 1 place and 4 points behind Andrea Nisler. So Adrian, Emma Carey is going to have herself a day. Margaux, who's going to have themselves a day tomorrow?
I think Luca could have a day where he moves up on the men's side, and on the women's side, it may be a moving down for Sam just in terms of the liftoff. Again, I love her as an athlete and wanted to see her be succeeding and stay at the top. Just again, looking at the liftoff and how she might compare to other women's numbers. I also think Gabby will have a place, even though she's relatively close to the top. I think she'll have a great strong day where she can move up even a few more spots, get on that top 3 spot, and maintain that for the rest of the weekend.
All right, I
So
like it. I'm going to go to my own podium pick idea as Adrian did, but I'm going to look at more of one of my dark horses.
Ooh.
And as I scroll all the way down to the bottom of the men's leaderboard, and I look at these events, I think Tola Marquinhos is going to have himself a day. You're talking about a clean and jerk. He's got the strongest lift of all the men competing. That chipper, it's heavy, it's long, it's got gymnastics. And Adrian, as we said in the previous shows, Tola's got some sneaky gymnastic skills for a big boy. And then if you talk about big boy power output, I mean, that's an event 3. And you're sitting at the bottom. It's going to be hard not to have yourselves a pretty big moving day. So I'm going to take the easy way out.
Good pick.
I'm going to take the easy way out. And I think Tola Marquinhos is going to have himself a day. Well, that'll do it for the recap of day number 1 as we preview day number 2. We will be doing one of these recaps at the end of each day of competition for the 2021 Dubai CrossFit Championship, as Margaux Alvarez and Adrian Conway will be joining me for each of these episodes. Guys, thank you so much. I look forward to the live stream, which will be on YouTube. Again, action will start at 4 p.m. there in Dubai. That'll be 4 a.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Central, and wherever else you land in the time zone multiverse that is the United States and the worldwide. Figure it out from there. I can't do it for you. I can barely get my Mountain, Pacific, Central, and Eastern times corrected. All I know is that it's 4 a.m. Pacific and 4 p.m. there in Gulf Standard in Dubai. Adrian, Margaux, thank you so much for joining the show. Thank you guys for listening, and we look forward to debriefing everyone for day number 2. Enjoy watching, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.